Hello, welcome back to What a Future. Been a little while since we were last out. A couple of times ago, we had a great conversation with Dr. Olga Franchak of the REC. Great conversation about diversity and inclusion, how we can include those in our workplaces going forward. Last time out, of course, we had the venerable Jeff Melander. A lot of conversation about raising pigs in that one, so do check that out if you're wondering what that's all about. But this week, we've got a very exciting conversation with Julian Roberts. Julian is an executive business coach and helps SMEs unlock their human potential, create growth strategies, and build resilient cultures and mindsets. A lot of experience in this field and a lot of good thoughts on how we can improve work going forward. So, Julian, such a pleasure to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Fraser. Looking forward to this conversation. Really looking forward to it.
Good. Likewise. Well, everyone knows the question. The question is, what is the biggest issue affecting the world of work right now?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I like that question. It's a real sort of thought provoker and an open thing. We're facing a real sense of more than ever before and uncertain times, constant change, whether it's government policy, tax cuts, various things that are going on, through to just failing in business or things you may be pushing. So that sort of world, I believe organizations facing that are lacking resilience, and that's the big thing. And I work a lot with organizations and teams to help build that and grow that. And I think that's the big thing at the moment. We need resilience. And that's not just on a personal perspective, but on a team and organizational point of view as well.
Interesting. How do you sort of define resilience there? What exactly are we sort of talking about?
Yeah, no, it's good to clarify what it is. And I think people have different views on resilience. In fact, I'm in the process of writing a book on team resilience, and I've been interviewing lots of people and getting their perspectives on what team resilience is. It's more than just grit and determination, because I think often it's perceived as something you can just plow through, and some people have it and some people don't. I believe you can develop it and you can build it and can grow resilience. But in essence, it's that ability to be faced with a challenge, overcome it, and learn from it and develop from that, and being able to navigate those challenges and those difficulties, be agile, be creative, innovative. There's a whole host of stuff that comes with it. But having that ability, when you get knocked down or you get faced with challenges, when you've gone through something, is what did you learn? And it's that learning loop is the important piece. And I often take teams on a journey of thinking, what did you learn by that difficulty, that challenge? And that's where the nuggets of wisdom and the things that really help build teams going forward. And so the learning piece is really important as part of that, developing that overcoming of resilience.
That makes sense. So I suppose it's about saying, this thing happened and maybe it wasn't ideal. But as you say, what can we do? There's something we do at what are called a blameless post-mortem. We borrowed it from something Google do, but we find that a very good way. Is that the sort of thing that you mean, that if you can address those issues and create those learning sort of ideas, then you can push a new sort of system going forward that maybe gives you more strength if things go awry in future.
Totally, and it sounds really obvious, doesn't it? You just said almost like taking time to pause, to reflect, and to understand what happened and what can we do different next time. And I think a lot of organisations are running so fast. They don't do that. Even when things are successful and they've achieved stuff, you still need to take time to see what did you learn from that point in time. And I talk about processes, building in resilient processes, and one of those processes is what I call the repair process. And it's a process that the US Army have been doing for years. Is almost like a debrief. So whether you've gone through a challenge or a success, you debrief that team or that organization. What do we do? How do we overcome that? What are our learnings? What do we need to now put in place for next time? Then we need to do differently next time. And it's a vital part of organizations to grow and to develop, is that learning loop. And a debrief does it. And again, it sounds really obvious when you do it. And I do a lot of this with teams. And you can see them when I share this. They go, oh yeah, that's really interesting. I need to do more of that. And it's done on a personal level as well. And I think it's important as individuals and creating, I suppose, a culture and an approach to um, your growth as an individual is taking time out to reflect. And because reflection is a way of processing life, and often we don't process life enough. I coach individuals, CEOs, and the coaching session creates that sort of processing life, that reflection time. And I think you need to do that with organisations as well as individuals as well.
Absolutely, very, very interesting. I think you're right. We often get sort of carried away in the now, I suppose, and it's long been known that an issue with the way that we tend to deal with stress is we push ourselves further into trying to fix the problem, which in turn creates more stress. Sometimes just coming away and rethinking, how often have we come back to a problem the next day and felt that the solution is quite clear when it wasn't the day before. I think that reflection is very, very powerful. So I suppose when we're talking, of course, about the issue that this is creating within companies. What are the sort of telltale signs that people, maybe aren't doing this, this reflection, this learning, this sort of resilience planning, as we're talking about?
Well, one of the things is, you don't start to achieve things. You start to have low morale in a team because you're not being successful. You feel like you're metaphorically putting a head against a brick wall and banging the same door and not doing anything differently. And I think that's quite demoralizing in a team. Your productivity goes down, results go down, and the whole sense of that team starts to become a bit sort of negative and not feeling how it should be in terms of high performance. So it's all the opposite of high performance, resilience and overcoming agility. So you just become very sort of fixed mindsets. We've always done it this way, can't do anything else differently. And then you end up just almost fading into the background, really. And certainly if you're in a competitive environment, you will lose your competitive edge because you're not moving forward, you're not creating new ideas, you're not sort of thinking how else can we tackle these problems. And also, I think you get, and this can happen on a personal level as well as a team perspective, is where you need to sometimes accept the reality of those difficulties. Because I think sometimes people think personal challenges or challenges to an organization are a personal thing. They're not at all. They're just a fact of life. Life will always throw at you difficulties. You're in a startup and you'll always have difficulties. That's the fact of life. It's not being negative, and it's almost accepting that. And I think, okay, and then you can move on. Because if you don't accept it, you just end up burying yourself in a pit of despair and a pit of frustration. Thinking, why has this happened to me? Why am I not getting the funding? Why am I not getting the sales? And you end up just burying yourself into a pit and not moving anywhere and just becoming quite blinkered in your approach as well. So a lot of companies, there's a lot of negativity that will come with the lack of that resilience.
Yeah, that's interesting that you pointed out. I suppose, yes, I've sort of my belief is if there's nothing sort of happening that requires some attention, hopefully it's not going wrong per se, but it's it's something that we know we could do better. That if that isn't happening, then I think we're going backwards. There's a two sayings come to mind. One is that I've long been told that companies, even very established companies, need to be able to dramatically rethink what they're doing on approximately every 10 years in order to keep up with the change in the world. I mean, I think given the change we've seen in the last 5 years, 10 years might now be a bit out of date, and we might need to move even faster than that, especially with upcoming changes about AI and various elements on that side of things. That was the first thing. I've lost the second one, so let's talk about that, and I'm sure it'll come back to me. So, yeah, is that something that you see running true, that people need to be constantly sort of pushing, forward in order to maintain that competitive advantage, constantly sort of questioning not just the things that they do, the processes on the day-to-day basis, but actually the wider sort of area around?
Yeah, and I think I talk a lot about purpose within organisations, and to be, really purpose driven is the best way. That becomes your North Star. And if you're truly purpose driven and sort of and grounded in purpose, it's usually bigger than even 5, 10, 20 years. It's much bigger than you as a company. It's more sort of giving to the world in a sense. And I think it's important to have that, because that becomes the North Star. Because when you are faced with, as you say, all these challenges within the sort of 4 or 5 years, it feels like constantly all the time and from every direction, you can feel a little bit sort of bashed about, on a little boat in a sea, just thrown around. But if you know you've got an overall direction, an overall purpose, then that helps keep you tethered or anchored to something that's really much bigger than you, and stops you from not only getting battered from all the challenges, but also not getting caught up with the new shiny bits, the shiny stuff that comes up your way and goes, oh, this must be interesting. This will grow our business. This will do that. And actually, when those things come in, you can actually go, does this align to our overall direction, our overall North Star? If it does, then go off and do it, and you've got the resource. If it doesn't, then just discard it or just put it on hold for a moment. And I think that's what I'm trying to get businesses to think far bigger. So almost, it's not about every year doing a review of your business, but almost getting real clarity on the bigger purpose, which might be 10, 20 years out. And I remember during COVID and that week of the first lockdown, when everybody was in a state of shock, what on earth's going on? How do we navigate this? And I remember talking to a CEO who I knew they led a purpose-led organization, and he was coming to me for sort of advice. Not that I knew anything. I've never been through such a thing, as we'd all hadn't. But I did say, does your purpose of your organization change in spite of what's going on right now? And he said, well, broadly nothing, not really. And I said, well, take your team, go back to your purpose, read it, understand why it's there, what it means, and see what inspiration you get from that. And he did that. He went away with his team. They sort of talked about it, what it meant to them. And I said, use it as a way of saying, okay, your purpose has not changed. The thing of how you do go about it and the timing might have changed. And so use that as a source of inspiration. And what they did that for a day, came back. They were all energized, more focused. They lifted their gaze a little bit from the difficulties of the here and now, and then started to come with ideas of how they were going to overcome things, change ways of working, to keep us online with that purpose. And so that's what a purpose does. It enables you to navigate those difficulties when you're in the minutiae of life, when it's really difficult, to step back a little bit and think, oh, where are we going in this bigger direction? Is this going the right way? How do we sort of slightly navigate this differently? So that's what I would say to organizations. Get clarity on your purpose and embed that in the organization and make sure people are really aware of it and what it means to them and how they contribute towards getting close to that as well.
Yeah, that's really powerful, as you say. One question that I've got in mind is that people, what is purpose, for example, is to create a world where everyone loves work. And so, as you say, it's bigger than us, and it's bigger than the next 5 years, and it's a difficult sort of thing. But everything that we do aligns, as you say, back to that North Star. Is this thing that we're doing now going to help with that long-term vision? And people who I've told this to in the past say, well, that's easy. You've got sort of purpose, but I make paper clips, or how do I find purpose in that? So I'm curious, without maybe with or without sharing your secret sauce, whatever however generous you're feeling with us today, how do you start that process? If you haven't got a clear sort of charities, for example, almost always have a purpose. A homeless charity wants to help solve homelessness, etc., etc. But if you don't have those sort of clear things, maybe you're a cleaning company, or a local sort of service company, or a handyman company, or manufacturing. Where should you find the purpose? Where is it, and how do we get there?
Yeah, it's a good question, a very good question, and I'll try and help.
You've got an answer, and you've got 30 seconds. We need.
Well, I was going to say,
solutions.
I won't be able to, but I'll give you some directions of how you might go about it, because I take companies on a few days of exploring this, because it's something that it's so important that you have to take some time to distill, reflect, and really sort of almost explore, and that's really important. But often with organisation, you can almost go back to at the outset that business got sort of birthed. what was the thinking behind it? Why did that happen? Why did that person decide to make a factory that creates paper clips, for example? What was it? What were they trying to solve? It was obviously a problem. They were inspired, and just get an understanding of that. You might not have that history and knowledge, but that's a good place to start, because there would have been something bigger than just, oh, I want to solve a problem. It was actually perhaps I wanted to have an impact on a community. I wanted to help people, solve their, filing of paper. Not that we do much paper nowadays, but it could be something like that. I mean, if you go back to, it's interesting on this. I think about Tesla. People think of like Tesla's mission, is to become the number one electric vehicles in the world, and actually that is not their mission. Their mission is to accelerate the world's, I get it quite right, view on renewable energies. So it's far bigger than just making a car, and far bigger than just the production of that. It's creating. So it's going back to the founder. What did they do? What was their passion? What was the key thing? If you don't have that thing, is there an understanding of, okay, take our organization, whatever we do, what is the impact that we have on our clients, on our staff, on society, on our community, and start to understand a bit more about what that impact is. And it's broader than just financial, broader than just profits. It's far bigger than that. And then another thing to do is start to understand your values of an organization as well. Start to see what has guided you over time, what guides you now as those guardrails of values of your behavior. Again, can give you a clue to what you're about, and start to create. It doesn't have to be a massive, giving to community type purpose. It's just got to have something slightly bigger than just we want to be the number one paperclip manufacturer, or we want to grow this. It's got to be bigger than that, and something more giving to the world. And I think it's that sort of process. I hope that helps. Sure. It's quite difficult to sort of sum it all up in a minute or so.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. Gives people a sort of idea of where to look, in order to find solutions. It reminds me of something that I often do when I'm talking to people about sort of more employee engagement type things. One of the things I talk about is purpose, and reasons to stay is another one. And very similar advice that I give to companies, where I say, when you're looking at job roles, if you want to try and define, the output and the outcomes from a job role and the purpose of a job role, one of the good ways to do that is to go back to why the job role exists in the first place. Because if the job role was created 30 years ago, we may well have lost that. But there's still, this job solves a problem, and the purpose can often be found in the problem statement that is being solved. And I think that's a really interesting sort of side of things. Does that sort of ring true with with what you're saying there?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's just delving and reflecting and asking questions about that, and start to bubble that up. And again, I do this with teams of whether senior leadership team, boards, and start to create that inspiration and see what comes of it. And then through that process, and then you get this resonator themes come out, and then okay, seems to be like some sort of statement we can come out of this, and then everybody sort of bought into it, and there's values linked to it as well. So that's the sort of process I would go through.
Yeah, very interesting. So I'm keen to move on to the second question now. We've established here, I think, that the sort of lack of vision and purpose within organisations on all levels within that organisation, it makes you less resilient when it comes to the change in the world. I'm sure listeners have heard me quote Justin Trudeau a number of times here that the world has never moved as fast as it is now, and yet it will never move this slowly again. I think it's important to recognise here that change is, to quote every cliche article out there, change is the new normal, and if we're not resilient, then there's things coming down the path that will knock us, and if we don't have that strong purpose, then we'll end up wavering and worrying and ultimately sort of taking our eyes off the prize. So let's assume that we can get through that. What would the world look like? What world should we be striving for if we can fix this problem?
Well, a number of things, really. I mean, it means you become an organisation, a workplace that embraces challenges, that not relishes at it, but certainly embraces it in a sense of overcoming them, and sees opportunity in challenge, which again it's just flipping the script on something rather than seeing it as a negative. It's seeing more of a positive. Okay, how can we now overcome this? How can we develop something that will navigate this challenge? And hey, that means we have to sort of get together and work this through. That means we have to sort of think of new solutions, and that's quite exciting. That's inspiring, and again, it starts to create that, and it's just a slight tilt on the mindset to be more not just optimistic, but seeing a challenge as clearly as an opportunity for a team to grow, to develop, and to really learn as well. What also comes out with that, because of that sort of mindset and because of that sense of agility, is you then start to get high performing teams, because you get teams then who are wanting to share, wanting to innovate, try new things. Because with resilience, the key thing as well to it is, if you're going to sort of overcome a challenge you've never faced before, you're going to have to do something probably different and something you've never done before. And that means, again, quoting cliches, getting out of your comfort zone is where you grow. It's a fact of life, you really do. And that also means coming up with new ideas and trying something new for the first time. It could go wrong, it could fail, it could not work. And I think that takes, a bit of courage. It takes an environment of being psychologically safe, because, there's no sense of blame, no sense of, chastising you because you've made a mistake. But actually, if you're going to innovate, truly innovate, you're going to make some mistakes along the way. And we know that as a reality, but that's important to recognize as well. But also with a team that is, performing at a resilient level, their well-being is in a good place, because, it starts to, you have leaders then who are also in role modeling about resilience, and therefore the individual resilience starts to go up in the team. So the whole host of stuff, productivity goes up, ideas, innovation starts to happen as well.
I mean, that's, I suppose, what we're all aiming for, isn't it? It reminds me of something that I've always said to anyone who's ever worked for me. I always say on the first day, I will never be annoyed with you for taking a risk and making a mistake. But I will be very annoyed with you if you don't come and tell me about it as soon as you realise there's a problem. And I think this is the way that we need to start looking at risk. It's something Elon Musk has famously said a number of times at Tesla and SpaceX and all of his companies, that if you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And this is scary. I think we also need to be aware of this, that change is inherently scary, and the flip to seeing change as an opportunity is a difficult one to make, but it's something that we can sort of push forward. And I think very interesting that you mentioned psychological safety there. Great study, of course, Project Aristotle by Google, really highlighting the importance of that in high performing teams. And it's something that we often sort of overlook, I think, this kind of psychological safety, because we all naturally fear being found out, especially if we're all worried about our own position. And so how do we go about making sure that we get that psychological safety, and we get that push and opportunity vision of change?
Yeah. Excuse me. I think just talking about psychological safety in itself is a positive, just by expressing what it means, what that means into an organization. The fact that it creates an environment of learning, an environment of people can challenge their senior people, they can take risks, they can make mistakes, and so that's almost talking about it and explain to people what it is. How you create it is even more difficult, and that's always the challenge with this thing. And I think that the key thing with any organizational change is using role modeling as the way to do that. It's probably the most powerful way to influence anybody is role modeling something, is demonstrating it through your actions. And there's lots of studies done, and there's a thing called the Bandura effect, and named after psychologists who did a whole piece on role modeling and the impact that has on individuals. Unfortunately, he used children at the time, which we wouldn't ethically use now. But there's lots of research that came out of that was really positive, because there's this whole there's the sort of conscious sort of awareness we have of people, but it's the subconscious piece that we're not aware of, and that's what we see. And so with psychological safety, the important thing is for a leader to demonstrate and show, in a genuine, authentic way, that he challenges his bosses, that he's learning new things and willing to sort of go back to school, so to speak, to learn new things. He's willing to take risks and then also show and that he's made some mistakes or failures, but he's learning from those, and it's creating that environment. That's the most powerful way to create a team or an organization that is psychologically safe, is by other people in senior position who role model it. And that's, to me, is one of the most simplistic ways of doing it. It's very difficult to do it because it requires leaders to be incredibly vulnerable, almost stepping into that arena of courage where you don't know the outcome. You don't know whether it's going to be a failure or it's going to be a success. And I think that is what people see and demonstrate. And you'd be surprised, by acting in that way, you start to change the temperature of your organization and your team. And then the other thing with that is, then when people do start taking those risks, they make mistakes, is then supporting them and saying, okay, you made that mistake. Okay, what did you learn from that? So the key thing is the learning loop, isn't it? So you did this, you tried it, we loved it, we encourage you, we're glad you're pushing the boundaries. But what did you learn? What would you do differently next time? And it's creating that and supporting people in that way. That's how you create psychological safety.
Yeah, I think that's, as you say, interesting, and there's plenty of studies to show the effect of these psychologically safe organisations. I think that it's quite aspirational, isn't it? It doesn't take much to think, and you answered straight away when I asked about what that looks like going forward and how you can expect those interactions to be, because I think a lot of people, they sort of understand that this is an important direction to go in, but it's almost like, okay, but why? Because I hear all of these nice things, but how is my day-to-day going to be different? And I think even on a very, very small level, walking in the door in the morning and finding everyone happy and chirpy and ready to solve the day's problems, that's an amazingly powerful thing already. And yet a lot of companies, a lot of cultures, they're missing this sort of thing. Is that a tell, do you think? Looking around, I've found you can roughly get the temperature of an organization simply by walking in the front door. You'll have a pretty good idea within 5 to 10 minutes of sort of wandering and seeing people and how they interact.
Yeah, and you can see that when you go in and see a meet a new team, and you see the leader of the team or the leader of the organization and the interaction, how quiet they are, how is a banter, I'm talking healthy banter, is it jovialness, and also, is there a healthy challenge to conversations? When I'm facilitating, not just on psychological safety, on resilience, on other stuff, I can sense how people are contributing, and I can sense, are they feeling comfortable contributing, or are they just going to say what the leader wants to hear about a certain scenario? And so, yeah, that's a good sense. But by virtue, generally, of bringing me in, they're more on the growth mindset and they're more wanting to learn. So it doesn't mean that they're right and they're perfect in a sense, far from it. But generally, the organisation I'm working with tend to be more tilted with, they want to change something. But yes, you can sense that. And what I love about working with teams is, I'll work with a team over 6 or 12 months, and I will see this difference happen and this interaction. I worked with a team of ladies few years ago who were looking to row around Great Britain. So this is more of a sports type team. And they came together, they didn't really know each other. And so, and you knew that because they were quite quiet, or they just didn't interact very well. And I just noticed over the time of working with them, how they changed and how they sort of worked together. They became incredibly psychologically safe as a team, very, great on communication, great on sort of challenging each other, but in a kind and respectful way, and just became a high performing team in terms at the end. And it was nice to see that, almost like sort of day and night type of approach over that 12 months. And so, yeah, you can sense that right at the start, but it's great when you see the difference start to come through as well.
And of course, the big question there is: did they row around the country?
Well, it's interesting. Interestingly, they unfortunately, they got 500 miles round. They started in Tower Bridge in London, took a
Right.
right and went round sort of the south coast, and got off the coast of Wales, and then got caught up in a storm,
Oh
which
gosh.
well, they were heading towards an anchorage off Southeast Island, and a storm was coming in like 12, 18 hours, but it came in as forecast earlier. And then they damaged some part of the boats, and then they were
Oh
basically
gosh.
freewheeling basically to shipping lanes, and they
Wow.
were in storms of like 30, 40-foot waves. And they got rescued by the lifeboats, and they said it was the worst storm since 1972 in that area. And so, but the great thing about that, as much as going back to purpose, because obviously they didn't achieve what they set out to do as a goal, which is obviously disappointing. But the girls, ladies went on to do some other great stuff themselves individually and learned a lot with all that process. But they were part of a study collecting data for climate change around the coast of England. So they're part of a study. So actually, they did achieve a lot. They did 500 miles worth of data collection, and so they were part of a bigger purpose. And I remember debriefing them and saying to them that to them to go away that they had done personally huge amount of things, but as a team they've done great things. But also they got towards this purpose of giving data to this university. And so again, purpose comes a bigger process, a bigger North Star than your goals, which you might not meet occasionally. So, that was an unfortunate thing, but they got many learnings from it as well.
Yes, well, I mean, obviously, I didn't know that when I asked the question, but actually, I feel that that's quite a perfect little summary of exactly what we're talking about here. That there's a purpose that's bigger than the goal, and sometimes you come up with literally in this case a headwind that's going to sort of scupper that goal, but the purpose can still be achieved. And if the team is, you can easily imagine what that would have been like if the team weren't psychologically safe, if they weren't working together, if they didn't trust each other, then things would have been different, and they may well not have had that resilience to continue. And so despite the cutting short of the actual route, it sounds like the purpose and ultimately the real goal of the of the whole expedition was achieved, and that's amazing. I'm sure that they were very grateful to have you there. Look, I think that's a really great place to end, and I think we've sort of gone round a really nice loop there of what resilience really means, and how we deal with that, and how we get that team together. Look, Julian, it's been a real pleasure to have you. If people want to find out more about you, where should they find you?
Well, you can go to my website, which is julianrobertsconsulting.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. Again, type in my name, Julian Roberts, you'll find me, the bearded guy. And also, I have a podcast called Helping Organizations Thrive, which you'll be coming on as well soon. So that'll be interesting, talking about leadership, resilience. And so, yes, it's you can find me there. If you type in Helping Organizations Thrive into Google, it will come up at the top there.
That's fantastic. I'll certainly be doing that myself. Look, Julian, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much for your time.
Brilliant. I've really enjoyed it, Fraser. Thank you.
Hello. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do like and subscribe. If you want to find out more about me, you can find me on LinkedIn. Or if you want to find out more about what Watter's trying to achieve, then do take a look at our website. Links to both are below. Thanks so much for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you next time.